Walrus, yes. Thank you for taking the time. I was just about to say, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. It's very early in the morning for you there. So, are you high? Now, what we have tonight is a Q&A via Skype, which is also via Twitter. So we're running our Q&A via the hashtag #WalrusInOz. So any questions that you have for Kevin, tweet that with the hashtag, and then we'll be able to reply it.
Tusk in Oz.
Yes. So Kevin, what I thought...
I'm sorry, that's the hashtag. It's Tusk in Oz, not Walrus in Oz.
Tusk in Oz, there we go. I've just got the walrus on the break.
I hate to be the guy that jumps on Skype and starts correcting Australians, but I'm sorry.
I wouldn't have it done by any other man in the world, trust me. So Kevin, I just thought I'd get the ball rolling.
Thank you.
I just thought I'd get the ball rolling.
Look at this, dude. This is me with bedhead. This is what it looks like to wake up with Kevin Smith. Isn't this horrifying? Imagine this coming at you in the night going like, hey, I want some midnight love.
I'm really glad the Batman symbol is still behind you in that though. That's fantastic in that.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to get the ball rolling and have the first question to you though. It's like, this film, as we heard from the closing credits, was kind of born out of a podcast. And I'm kind of curious to know, from that gestation period, how did you go from kind of podcast chat through to what we saw on the screen tonight?
First off, for everybody who's out there tonight, sitting there watching the movie, sorry. What I would say after an experience like that, because Tusk isn't a movie that I think you either like or hate or something like that. You experience it, and then it happens to you like herpes, and then you carry it. And before we jump into the answer to the question, which I swear I'll get to, you've all seen the walrus now. You've all seen Tusk on the screen, and this is a true story. Well, first time I went to Australia, everyone told me, you got to watch out for drop bears. That's what I look like.
Very much so.
As for where it came from, as you heard at the end of the movie, there's a podcast me and my friend Scott Mosier do called Smodcast. Episode 259 was an episode called Walrus and the Carpenter, where we sat around on the show, and for half the episode, we read a story that we'd found online. It memed around the internet a little bit about a year and 3-4 months ago. It came from Brighton, England, and it was about a guy who said, a big house, and I'm offering a room for rent. In exchange for this, for 2 hours a day, I would like you to dress up as a walrus. And during that time, you can't speak as a human. You can only make walrus noises. He said the noises were available on the internet. He said I would pitch you fish and crabs, and you have to catch them with your mouth. So, the dude got a lot of responses to the article. It was on gumtree.uk. There were a lot of people going, I'll dress up like a walrus for a free room. That's amazing. So we talked about this on the podcast, and you can hear, well, maybe not this section of the movie. At the tail end of the credits, you just hear us kind of already building it. But there's a point in the podcast where, something snaps in me, and I become obsessed with seeing this movie. And the only reason there's a lot of reasons I saw it through, but one of the main reasons, man, was I'd only had that snap one other time in my life, as far as I could recall. I've been doing this 20 years. 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, I loved comedies. And I would go see every comedy I could, but as much as I identified with the underdogs, I didn't fully identify with them. I love Animal House. But John Belushi's character, Bluto, I can't fully identify with him because I would never drink a full thing of Jack Daniels or something like that. So there was always a disconnect. And I was always like, when will I see people like me and my friends up there? Like the shit that we find funny, like Pussy and Star Wars and stuff like that. Where are the movies where they talk about other movies? Because that's all me and my friends did. And You hear me?
It's that Australian internet.
So there was a snap in me one morning, this was over 20 years ago, when I woke up and I realized, Kevin, nobody is ever going to make a movie about you and your friends or the shit you find funny. Nobody gives a fuck about you and your friends. They don't even know who you are. If you want to see a movie about the shit you find funny and you and your friends enjoy, make it yourself. And I did, and it was Clerks, and changed my life. So here I am 20 years later on this podcast, and it happens again, where I'm just like, you can hear it during the podcast. I get so sad that the movie doesn't exist. I'm like, where are the brave filmmakers who will make this type of movie? And I used to be a filmmaker. So I sat there, like you can hear me in the podcast talk myself into this. I'm so into the idea of seeing this movie about a guy who turns another guy into a walrus, and there's the snap again, where it's like, Kevin, nobody is ever going to make this fucking walrus movie. If you want to see it, just make it yourself. And, you know, I've had now 20 years experience in how to make a movie and stuff, and I wasn't like, it's a Chautauqua, walrus or die. It was really just like pushing whimsy every day. Every day I got up and I said, let's see how far I can take it. And, you know, there was a hashtag in the podcast, Walrus Yes. And we told people, like, if you think it's a cool idea, hit me on Twitter, Walrus Yes. If you don't, write Walrus No. Next morning, all Walrus Yes, one Walrus No. Now there's lots of Walrus No, I assure you. Holy crap. If you ever want to feel bad about yourself, go read the Walrus No. Even if it's not about you, you could be like, who can fucking withstand this? It's pretty terrible. But this is a story about the negative. This is a story about the positives. The Walrus Yes, man. A bunch of total strangers got up the next day. Took 7 seconds to be like, fuck it, Walrus Yes. That meant the world, man. It's just like, sometimes that's the kind of encouragement you need. Total strangers patting you on the back. Now, granted, it's the internet, and when the internet says do something, that's like your friend at a party when you're drunk and you whip your dick out and you're like, look at me, and he's like, do it, do it. There's a car crash factor to the whole thing where people are like, if he makes it, great. If he doesn't, watch him burn his career to the ground. So, you know, it was fun. It was an involved thing. So when I started writing, like, it wasn't like, I'm going to do this. I was like, let's see how far I can push it. And I swear to you, every day I pushed it a little bit. Didn't push too hard at all. People just got, like, captured by their imaginations were captured by the idea. They're like, are you fucking serious? A guy turns another guy into a walrus? Not a horse? Walrus? And because of that, you had a bunch of people kind of jump on just to see if it could happen. It was really beautiful. It was so indie film, it was nuts. And I was going to pay for it, man. I was going to put my house up and pay for it because I was like, who else is going to pay for this fucking walrus movie? And Demarest, and this company Demarest, this guy Sam Engelbart, I'll never forget it, man. He's sitting in my upstairs in my living room, and he points at the script, and he's like, are you fucking serious? And I was like, yeah, I would like to see this. And he goes, me too. So he put up the bond. It was like $2.8 million and stuff, which is, believe me, it's not pocket change, but in the movie world, that's like nothing. So we went forward and kind of made it. 6 months after I was sitting there with Scott on the podcast, going like, oh yeah, and at the end, it could be like Iron Man 3, or not Iron Man 3, it could be like Iron Man, where Jeff Bridges comes out in a bigger suit. Because that's what happens to the Tusk. It's like, oh, this is like fucking Iron Man. Iron Man. But the third act has this, the guy comes out in a bigger suit. And we say that on the podcast, and we're talking about it. 6 months later, I'm on set going, action, and there's Michael Parks in the bigger suit. Wow. This is pushing whimsy, man. And so, you know, some people, when the movie came out here, like, tore it to shreds and like, this is responsible. I couldn't really argue. When people were like, this is stupid, I'm like, isn't it? You know, it's just be like, people get real tight. They go, this is stupid. I'd be like, it is, but it's way in focus, right? I can't argue opinion, or it's subjective. People like love it, that's great. They want to hate it, that's great. But, you know, I like to kind of cut off the argument with just facts. where it's just like, where people go like, this is fucking terrible. And I'm like, I know, man, but Justin Long is in it. What's that have to do with anything? I was like, it's a fact. This part of the story is about like, let's see if we could do it. Let's push whimsy. Big part of the story has to do with the audience. And because some of the reactions online, on Twitter and on Facebook to the podcast really touched me. They were poignant, and they grabbed me and made me want to do this for this reason. I got to take a drink with malt cotton now. Russian. So, there was a reaction online from a couple people, not the whole people, all of the folks that listen to the show didn't react this way, but a few people did. Reaction was this: is that allowed? Are you serious? Is that how you get started? You just sat around and said, Human Centipede, Iron Man, and then you got to Tusk. Like, they were asking if that was like allowed, or if like that was permitted in how to get started. And that's what grabbed me. I'm a self-starter. I know how to get started. I finished poorly, as you've seen, but I know how to get started. So the idea is like, there are some people out there don't know how to get started, man. Like they would love to do what I do, and they could probably do it way better. Or not even what I do, something else. They just don't know how to get started, man. Like that journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with a single step. They don't fucking tell you that single step is the most difficult thing you'll ever do in your life. That's why people don't try, because it's like, look at the guff between me and there. What's the point? So for me, to have people listening to a moment of inspiration on a podcast where, you know, every once in a while you hear about a movie, you hear about it when like it's been set up, some cast is attached. They literally heard about the birth of a movie. There's a microphone on the moment when you, all that was missing was pling, or a light bulb going off. So they heard inspiration. And they heard how somebody got started. Two people have been working in the business for 20 years, sat down at microphones, said a couple movies, made each other laugh, smoked a bunch of weed, and suddenly there was this movie. And so the audience, man, was like, some of those cats were like, I had no idea that was a... And that made me want to do it, just to open source the movie, just to be like, okay, you've heard it be born. I'm going to take you all the way through the journey, man, all the way to the end. When it comes out theatrically and I get fucked. But still, it exists. And they got to see everything. They got to see us try to cast it, try to put money together. They got to see us make it. They got to see us take it to Toronto. They got to see us take it out, now take it out into the world. So for me, that was like so important. Like the audience gives me everything I have. I can wake up at 3:30 in the morning and do a Q&A with you all, because I don't have to get up for a job in the morning, because my job is just to be myself, thanks to the audience. And the audience said, Walrus, yes. And they were like, go make the movie. And I figured the best gift I could give back to the audience is certainly not, you know, Tusk, because that's not for everybody. Sourcing the movie and showing everybody how to do it. So that percentage of people out there who are like, how is this done? You know, some cats think it's alchemy. They think you go to a safe and you pull out a dusty parchment and you invoke Satan and a script is born. It's not. It's sitting around with a friend and going like, Human Centipede plus Iron Man, ending of Iron Man equals Tusk. You know, and some cats now start their journey because of that. And to show for it, I got this weird walrus movie that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
So many kind of tweets coming through, mostly about Michael Parks. Now, I don't think you obviously could imagine this film without the great Michael Parks. So, did you write the script with him sort of in mind, and how did Michael get involved with the project?
If you listen to the podcast, the Origin podcast, I never once say Michael Parks. In fact, I believe we say Jeff Bridges at some point. So, and I think that's because we were like Iron Man. And so I'd never really spoken about it on the podcast. When I looked at Walrus Yes the next day, and people were like, do it. I said, all right, man, what would make me want to do it? Because, like, you know, this is a very first world kind of problem, but I had kind of retired from films. Like, I'd walked away from filmmaking. I was doing podcasting, live show, TV, and that was fun, and I felt like I didn't have anything to offer films anymore. A bunch of critics just reminded me I don't, but, you know, so that was kind of cool. So I felt like I was kind of done. So I said to myself in a very first world way, if I had to be back on a movie set, like what would bring me back to a movie set? And I'd made Red State, this movie with Michael Parks, and I loved it. But he's an acting fucking Yoda. Like the dude, he doesn't speak backwards, not like that Yoda, but he's brilliant like Yoda. And he's basically he's forgotten more about performance than most people will ever know. So I said to myself, like, if I was going to be on a set with Michael Parks, watching him be the guy that turns the other guy into the walrus and stuff, if I could, like, take Red State and take out the sex, religion, politics, and just have Michael Parks chewing the scenery, saying crazy things about walruses and being insane, like that worth it. That would be amazing. I'd sit on a set for that. So he was the first ingredient in the stew, and I reached out to him, and he was like, yeah, absolutely, go ahead. But I said, I'm going to write you this part where you turn a guy into a walrus. And he goes, okay, who's the guy? And I said, Quentin Tarantino. And he goes, oh, that'd be fun. Because Quentin in the movie originally. Because if I hadn't seen From Dusk Till Dawn or been familiar with Quentin and his work, I would have never been introduced to the work of Michael Parks. It was at the beginning of From Dusk Till Dawn in 1995. I'm sitting at the Laemmle multiplex. Is an indie cinema here in Los Angeles. Bob Weinstein, guy who runs Dimension, he's like, you want to see Quentin and Rabbit new music? It's actually a pretty good impression. And he goes, fuck yeah, I want to see that part thing. So we go to the theater and we kick back to watch, you know, this mind-bending, what's going to be this mind-bending Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez werewolf movie with Harvey fucking Keitel in it. So, you know, this is going to be it. They broke the fucking mold. They cracked the code. This movie is going to be the answer to all of our fucking problems in life. And in the first 5 minutes of that movie, a guy who's not a vampire, not Harvey Keitel or George Clooney, comes in and steals the whole fucking movie. And that was Michael Parks. He's the sheriff that walks in Benny's World of Liquor in the beginning. And I was so fascinated by him, man. Like, I love actors. That's why I do what I do. It's not because I love to move a camera around. I'm not very good at that. What I love to do is hang a camera on an actor and let them talk for a long time, because that to me is the magic trick. It's like, look at this person, man. They're saying things off the top of their head. Seems like it's off the top of their head, but we all know they memorized the script, and you're believing it's happening in the moment. Like, that's my favorite part of movies, the magic trick of acting. So to put that dude in front of a camera, in front of a camera, just hang there on him and let him talk and stuff like that. That's what they did in From Dusk Till Dawn, man. Like, I fell in love with Michael Parks. I was like, this guy's just an acting genius. So I always said from that moment forward, I was like, I got to put him in something. You know, like, I want to work with this dude, but I had nothing for him. Like, what could I do? I couldn't write him in part as like Silent Bob's grandpa. Like, that'd be stupid. So I was like, well, now that sounds pretty good. What could I put him in? And it was years later, 15 years later, it was Red State. So because of Quentin, you know, I got to work with this acting Yoda. So I was like, I'll put Quentin into the Walrus movie as well. But it wasn't as the Walrus. I wanted Quentin to play Guy Lapointe. And so I sent the script to Quentin, and he had just done Django, and he did an Australian accent in Django, which I'm sure you all thought was very authentic. So, but, you know, I was like, he could do funny accents. And so I said, he could do French Quebec. This would be amazing. The guy who introduced me to the guy who's the star of the show would be in the movie. How cool is that? And Quentin passed. He was like, I'm not acting right now. So, or I'm not acting in this. I don't know what it was. A couple months later, I heard that somebody was like, Quentin thought you wanted him to play the Walrus. And I was like, oh, I wanted to play Guy Lapointe. So we didn't get Quentin for Guy Lapointe, but we got very lucky. Some other guy, Guy Lapointe, was pretty good too. Parks did it all, but Parks was responsible for Guy Lapointe as well. Because when I reached out to Guy Lapointe, I've known Guy Lapointe for many years through our kids. Our kids are good friends and stuff. So school functions and family events and stuff, I've seen him over the years. Wonderful human being, excellent human being. It's weird, you sit there talking to him, and then periodically you're like, oh my God, you're an icon who should be on the Mount Rushmore of acting. About back to talk, you know. It's just crazy. So we don't have the kind of relationship. We talk about movies, but I didn't have the kind of relationship, and I certainly don't make the kind of movies where I'd be like, hey, we should work together one day. That never happened. Here I was with the script for Tusk, and I reached out to Quentin, and Quentin passed, and I said, well, here I am pushing whimsy. Like, you already got a script, and, like, you know Parks is in it and stuff, and you've got this wonderful part for, you know, a eccentric performance, somebody just chew the scenery with the accent work. I said, scrape everything away. In a world of pushing whimsy, just scrape everything away. Who would be the best person for this job? Never mind money, social strata, whatever. Who would be the best actor for this job? And I was like, hands down, Depp. Depp would crush this. So I said, let me reach out, man. And so I reached out, and I was just like, hey, man, I hate to be that guy, but I got a movie, and you'd be great for it. So cheesy. And I said, listen, this comes down to an actor named Michael Parks. I said, I made this movie Red State with him, and I had to go out. I self-distributed it, so I was very out loud in front of it and blah, blah, blah. And so a lot of people were like, fuck him in his movie. And Michael Parks never got the credit he was due or the attention he was due for a really wonderful performance. So I said, my only regret about Red State is I never got to shine a light on Michael Parks. And this is what I'm going to try to do with this new movie. I said, it's a little weird. It's about, you know, I'll give you a link to a blog of what it's about because I've written a blog. And so I guess he read the link because he wrote back, I love Michael Parks. So I was like, oh, I said, well, you would help me really call attention to him in this movie simply by being in it. He said, send me the script. I sent him the script, and then I think it was like September 4th of last year. So it's just coming up on like a 1-year anniversary or something, or 1 year, 1 month. I got a text from him where he's like, I love this script. It's so batshit. Let's do this. A lot of people will take shots at this movie for the rest of my life. I don't care. They can put on my gravestone, this fat motherfucker made us. I will love it. Me so much. Like, I was out of the movie business. Now, like, it gave me the funding for Clerks 3. We just finished almost.
Woo!
No, we just finished. We're 3/4 done with a movie called Yoga Hosers, which is a spin-off from Tusk. It's about little girls in the convenience store.
And they're somewhat related to you.
Yes, yeah, one of them's my kid, my daughter. It's crazy. The movie is 180 degrees away from what Tusk is. Like, it begins as a John Hughes movie for the first 15 minutes, and then we flip the switch, and then it becomes Tusk with teens, because there's rubber monsters at the center of it. I'm in this real rubber phase now after Tusk, working with Robert Kurtz, the guy that made the walrus suit. So I'm like, ooh, practical effects. So Tusk has big walrus in it. Yoga Hosers, we haven't said what the monster is, but it's fucking badass, man. It's about two 15-year-old girls, and it is, but then it's about this other thing entirely. And then the third movie in what we're calling the True North trilogy is this movie called Moose Jaws, which is very simply Jaws with a moose.
Woo!
But then getting back on point, like, there's so many great things came from Tusk. You know, it's right now, of course, there are a bunch of people hammering at it, so it's very easy for me to slip into justification mode, but there is no justification needed, man. It was like, I could have not made a movie at all. I could have just sat there with my friend on a podcast, made some funny jokes, had a cool idea, let it slip, and then sat around and went back to my life. And I promise you, A, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. B, I wouldn't be editing Yoga Hosers. C, we wouldn't be prepping for Clerks in June. D, there'd be no Moose Jaws. Like, I would have never made a movie with my kid, and scrape all that away, man. Like, I got to work with, like, the greatest actor of my generation. That was never going to happen. Never, never, never. There was nothing that was ever going to bring us together in that way, except this weird walrus whimsy, man. So it's important, kids, to, like, don't listen to people when they're like, you're fucking stupid and fat. Well, when they say it to me, you can listen to it, but when they say it to you, don't listen to it, man. Like, just do what you want in this life. As long as you're not going to hurt anybody in the process, there's no point in not just chasing your whimsies and trying to make all your dopey dreams come true. One day we're going to be in a fucking grave, man. And you don't want to be laying there going like, I should have made that walrus movie. That walrus movie. You know, that's the kind of thing that makes, like, life worth living. And in terms of, like, people going, I hate this and I love this, that's tremendous. I would love it if everybody was like, oh, 100% we agree with this. But then it would never be Tusk. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a cult film. Some people have to be like, this is fucking dumb, and what a waste of time, and why would anyone do this? And some people have to be like, are you kidding me? This is religion. This is the bridge to the next thing. Or this is fucking like, this is the best thing he's done since fucking Clerks, so shut up and let me keep doing it. Like, either way, it's just nice that people are receiving it, that it makes a reaction. You know, there are a lot of movies I see where I'm like, when the movie's done, I'm just like, well, that's finished. And it's nice to have something where it's just, oh man, like that pisses me off, or oh man, that took me somewhere, you know, good or bad, or just anything but indifference. I mean, that's kind of what I'm in the business of doing is creating a reaction. I'm not like a provocative guy. I don't like to be that guy where I'm like tweaking your nipples just for a reaction. But there's nothing else I could do. Like, I've tried to be mainstream, you know, cop out, didn't work. Zack and Miri make a porno, it's kind of the mainstream stab, Jersey Girl. I just don't have mainstream sensibilities. The only reason we're having this conversation is because 20 years ago, I was like, I want to make a movie about a guy working in a convenience store. And then the only reason we're having this conversation now is 20 years later, I was like, I want to make a movie about a guy who turns a guy into a walrus. That's what I do. You know, it's like, I only know how to make Kevin Smith movies, so that's pretty much what I should be sticking to.
Maybe a kangaroo should be considered for one of the next
I'm ready to sell up the franchise rights to Tusk to Australia for their own version. Ouch.
International flavour. Obviously, you know, a lot of your early films were set in New Jersey, obviously, but this one takes place in Canada. There's quite a few tweets wondering why Canada.
Canada I'm a big Canada-phile. I've always loved Canada. My parents took us there, me and my brother and sister, when I was 5 years old. It was the first place. My mom's always like, that's what you remember? We got in a car, and they're like, we're going to another country. And I was like, what? Is that possible? And they're like, we're going to drive up north to a country called Canada. And we drove to this foreign land where everybody spoke American, but we were in a different country, you know? And there were waterfalls, and there were all these stories about people that get in the barrels and go over the waterfalls to see if they could survive, and they all died. And there were cops dressed in red coats. Everything about it was like a comic book. Everything was a little different. They all had their own language and stuff. And, you know, but my language, they just put A at the end of it. So it was always fascinating to me as a kid. And then Degrassi, junior high, I loved, and SCTV, Bob and Doug McKenzie. Hockey is a big part of my life. So I've always been a big Canada-phile. The podcast that we talked about, The Walrus and the Carpenter, where Tusk came from, was set in England. The hoaxer, Chris Parkinson, he's the guy who's one of the producers on the movie. He was the guy in Brighton, England, who woke up one morning and wrote, like, he was like, ugh, I'm going to write a thing about a walrus. And he wrote that fake ad on Gumtree.uk. So when we did the episode of the podcast, somebody, like, hit me with an email going, like, I know the guy who wrote that ad. That's a hoax. And I was like, that's a hoax, damn it, because I wanted it to be true so much. So I got in touch with the dude, Chris Parkinson, man, and I was like, how would you like to come produce a movie? And he was like, oh, splendid. And so he sent the movie. At one point, when they're looking for a walrus, and Genesis and Haley are in the bar, and they're showing a picture of him on an iPad, the guy sitting on the bar, that's Chris Parkinson. He's a man in Brighton, and he's just on a recent episode of Smodcast. He's adorable. He just, every once in a while, likes to do these hoaxes and stuff. And so this hoax obviously lit my imagination and stuff, so we brought him in and said, hey man, come be a producer. So the whole thing was supposed to take place in England, technically, if you stuck to the ad. But part of the stew of me making the movie was me just doing whatever the fuck I wanted. Like, when you watch this movie, clearly I just don't give a fuck anymore. So, in a way, I give a fuck more than I ever have, because I was like, instead of trying to please other people, instead of going, what's popular? What are other people doing? This was literally me going like, this is such a masturbatory movie, because it's me going, what makes me happy? And one of the things that makes me happy is Canada, and all the Canada stuff that Scott Mosier do on Smodcast. So I was like, I'm going to shift everything over to Canada, man, because I know so much about Canada. I can pull from Canadian lore and whatnot, and that would make me happy. Like, fuck everything else. It would just make me have this little cycle of, well, I didn't know there'd be 3, but the little movie set in Canada where I can do my, like, dopey Canada jokes that me and Scott Mosier do. Like, I included the character of Guy Lapointe simply because he was from another podcast, an episode of Smodcast we had done, like, months prior. And, you know, I included the character just because I knew when Scott read the script, Scott would be like, you put fucking Guy Lapointe in here, and that would have been enough for me. Just one reaction, one guy would give me. So that's sometimes that's how you got to do it. Like when you're trying to mass please everybody, you know, there are a lot of people out there who are far better at mass pleasing than I am. I can please a very specific group, man. I'm the kink guy. Yeah, I'm gonna go around the world, but fuck, I give a hell of a blowjob. So that's specialty. But for me, that's enough. Like, you got to know your strengths, and that's my strength. Like, I could do that thing very specifically. Canada, I knew I could do in a way that I would love, and kind of it would click with a few people. I thought that line, like, I don't want to die in Canada, would connect with people. It did, like, the trip for people, like, it's weird. So for me, it was all about, let me put a camera on, or let me put a camera on the thing that I love, and that's Canada. So from that, like, you know, I got so into it. And you know, maybe I'm the only one, but I don't give a shit. I was like, I want to make more. Like, I fell in love with fake Canada. There's only very little of it in Tusk. Like, Michael doesn't put on a very thick Canadian accent. It's really like, you know, the border crossing guard and the two girls in the convenience store. But that is kind of like, take that, blow it up, and that's what Yoga Hosers is. It's a completely cartoon Canada world that, like, I had such a blast playing in, and then I wanted to extend it into Moose Jaws. These three Canadian films are, instead of like in the beginning it was me playing in New Jersey, now it's like me playing in fake Canada. And the really weird thing is, like, we're Yoga Hosers, we always call fake Canada. But we were in the middle of shooting Yoga Hosers, and I had to leave and go to the Toronto Film Festival for the Tusk premiere. So I went from fake Canada to real Canada in like the span of less than a day. And oh my God, we're not even close. Hopefully in the summer. We've shot 3/4 of the movie. We shot it the same way we shot Tusk, where with Tusk, we shot 15 days in North Carolina, and then we wrapped for 3 months, and then picked up the Guy Lapointe days in Los Angeles. And those were only 2 days. Everything we did with Guy, we did in 2 days. Man, that's an important lesson for any filmmakers out there who are like, number one, we're not taking lessons from you, motherfucker, I just watched something. But if you want to take a lesson at all, you can shoot 10 pages of dialogue in a day if you got people sitting at a table talking. Like, you know, a lot of people say about this movie, it's just a bunch of people talking and telling stories. That's the point. It's a movie about the dangers of storytelling. So there are moments in this movie where instead of doing what you should do in a movie, which is show you things with pictures, we just hang a camera on an actor who literally tells you a fucking story. One guy even says, let me tell you a story. Like, it's constantly about storytelling. So it was easy to shoot Guy Lapointe out in 2 days because most of his stuff very stationary, and he could just blow through fucking dialogue. It was incredible. So keep shit cheap, man. Keep it dialogue heavy if you have a low budget. Anyway, why did I even answer that?
It's upcoming theatrical.
Excellent. Thank you. I hit what they call a pothole. Finish it now. March. That's right now. We're scheduled to pick up Mr. Depp when he finishes. I think he's shooting Alice in Wonderland 2 or something. He finishes there, and then he comes to us, and then we finish the last quarter of the movie. Guy Lapointe's in a bunch of others. Michael Parks, but they all play different characters, except for the girls play the same characters, and Johnny plays Guy Lapointe again. So hopefully, if we pick up in March, maybe we're out by the end of summer. I'm not sure. First, we have to pick up a distributor. That would be the first thing. Somebody's got to put the movie out. It's been financed, and we've made 3/4 of it, but then we got to finish and find somebody who'll bring it out into the world. And right now, there are a bunch of people, oddly enough, there are a bunch of people who are like, my favorite part of Tusk were those little girls. I was like, they were such a sharp part of it. They're like, to my point. So there are a bunch of people who've been tracking Yoga Hosers, which is kind of cool, man. So hopefully we'll wind up with a cool distributor or something like that. And hopefully it'll be out this summer. And then Moose Jaws, depends on when I finish the script. I'm halfway through with it right now. But then either that will happen prior to Clerks or after Clerks.
Well, we're going to very much anxiously awaiting our next trip to Fake Canada. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, though, Kevin. An hour or so ago. I'm so sorry, but you know, the film opens here theatrically next week, so you know, obviously Twitter is the best friend of film. So everyone in the audience, please jump on Twitter and hashtag the hell out of Tusk. And just for me personally, absolute joy speaking to you. I'm sure everyone else in the audience is the same. I grew up on your films, so it's something that it's been a real joy to speak to. And would everyone in the audience please give a very heartfelt thank you.
Cheers, Walrus.